Now we're preparing. All right, and we are live.
Thank you, Jarrett. So hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Epilepsy Toronto's BIPOC Disability Employment Panel Discussion. It's in honor of Disability Employment Month. My name is Noura, and I'll be your host for the day. So thank you to those who are joining us on Facebook Live. I just wanted to let you know to please feel free to leave your comments or questions in the comments section, and we'll be sure to address those throughout the panel discussion today. I also wanted to say a special thank you to our panel members, and thank you for being with us today to share your expertise and experience. And I won't take too much of your time with the introduction, and I'll leave it to the panel members to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit of a brief overview of their story. And I'll start off with Shawnette, if you're okay with that.
Great. So my name's Shawnette D'Souza, and I am an HR practitioner in terms of my professional background. I've been in HR close to 15 years so far, so in various different roles and specialties within HR. Currently, I work as a talent strategist for Powerhouse Talent, which is a company where we focus on employer branding. So it's just a little bit of a different side of HR that I wanted to explore. And we focus on really helping employers tell their story, sort of bring their strategy to life. And then what I particularly focus on as well is telling that story in a more inclusive manner, drawing from my own personal experience with disabilities and just being in the HR field as well. And on the other side, in the last couple of years, I've been focusing a lot on actually advocating for people living with invisible disabilities and inclusion. So I do education sessions, public speaking, writing, whatever it calls for in terms of the client. And I've had some great experiences doing that as well. And my affiliation with Epilepsy Toronto has been mostly through my own journey with epilepsy, which began in 2012 now. And it has been sort of, up and down, going through different paths and different phases as all of us go through. And through that, I happened to meet someone at Epilepsy Toronto who introduced me to all of their programs, which were great. And I've been an ambassador for a long while now, several years. And I really enjoy sort of advocating and spreading epilepsy awareness, and which actually drew me into starting my own practice as well. So that's been my experience really with Epilepsy Toronto, living with epilepsy, as well as, which is one of many invisible disabilities as well. So, and really my focus is talking a lot about it, raising awareness, and as a result of that, people understanding, because more awareness and more education will lead to just more understanding in terms of workplaces, because I think a lot of issues do get dealt with in terms of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and disabilities, I feel like, does not factor into that picture, especially invisible disabilities. And so I focus a lot on that in terms of telling stories. And I think that's what we need right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shawnette. And we're so happy to have you here to give us the HR perspective, especially as someone who's also living with epilepsy. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Paul, can I have you introduce yourself as well?
Yes. My name is Paul Scotland. I'm a criminal defense lawyer by profession. I've been practicing law and criminal law in one form or another for over 20 years. I've been Legal Aid Ontario Criminal Duty Counsel. I've joined a firm as an associate. I've done per diem Crown issues, and I've been working the last 18 or so years in private practice, both running my own firm as well as assisting other lawyers. The nature of my practice has been working with the most marginalized, which includes both people who are racialized as well as those with visible and invisible disabilities. Although I do not have epilepsy, I come from various community organizations such as the Ethno-Racial People with Disabilities Coalition of Ontario, and just through the nature of my work, I have dealt with clients that have epilepsy as well as other disabilities. So I consider myself functional in terms of providing service delivery. And as everybody can tell, I'm racialized, as well as I have a permanent physical disability that I've had since birth, which affects the way I walk.
Thank you for that introduction, Paul, and thank you for being with us today. Your vast experiences are going to be, I think, very interesting for all of our listeners today as well. Cheryl, can you please introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cheryl Mendes. I have a diploma in business management. I realized marketing was more me. I went back to school right away, got my diploma in marketing. I moved in different organizations. My current one is corporate law. I'm in marketing specifically at a corporate law firm. I've been here for 10 and a half years. I was first diagnosed with epilepsy towards the end of high school. Actually, that's when they diagnosed me, but I had it way before that. They just never caught me because it was goodness, my brain went blank on the name of the seizure it was, but I was diagnosed with absent seizures when I was first diagnosed. When I hit my 30s, my seizures worsened to grand mal, and I was put on the surgery wait list. I was in hospital undergoing a 2-week testing. And over there, I met a young man who told me about Epilepsy Toronto, and I did not know any such organizations to support anyone diagnosed with epilepsy existed. So I was kind of excited about that. So since December, so I was in hospital May of 2014, December of 2014 is when I first started participating, going to Epilepsy Toronto for group sessions, counseling, meeting others like me, because I thought I was the only one. But there's tons of people that you just don't see because it's an invisible disability. So that's where I got to start helping out, volunteering, being an advocate, speaking up for other people, educating others. This last Purple Walk we had for Epilepsy Toronto this year, I noticed I was wearing all purple. It had epilepsy. I had epilepsy everywhere, on my face mask, on my shirt, on my, written on my face. And I went to a store and people were still asking me, like, what is this? So I still feel like there's a lot of education that needs to be, put forth into people, because no one really still knows what epilepsy is, or they've never heard the word. So I will never stop being an advocate for epilepsy.
We love to hear that. And of course, especially with an invisible disability, advocacy is so important. So thank you for being here with us today. I do have some questions for the panel members, some that are directed at a specific panel member, others that are a little bit general, but I do want to start with Paul, and I am wondering you to talk a little bit about your law experience, but what drew you specifically to law?
I think I like to laugh and sort of say that I couldn't do math or science, so writing and reading became the fallback position. I think on a more serious note, I think having had challenges throughout, I guess, the education system in terms of the tendency to stream and keep streaming students with disabilities, racialized minorities. My parents were my first advocates, as well as the doctor that I had as a child growing up. It was really just, let him struggle, let him fight. He's got the potential if he just puts his mind and the supports are in place. So I think having seen my parents act as an advocate, and then, perhaps when I started looking for employment, and as well as whatever issues might arise through high school and then university, I too had to take up the advocacy piece to sort of marshal opportunities for myself and to claim my space, if you will. That I think led the foundation for seeking a career in law, as well as liking to talk and never being quiet.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I'm glad that it came from a place that you wanted to advocate for yourself and fight for your own rights.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering, Shauna, looking back at your experience in HR, what has been done in the past, or maybe what initiatives have been done in the past or that you see coming up in the future that you see as positive steps towards greater inclusion in the workplace for employees living with disabilities specifically?
So I think the biggest one, or one that I've been seeing for a while, are business resource groups. So and some organizations will call it employee resource groups. These are essentially groups that are created within, whether it's, regionally, globally, depending on the organization, focused on certain causes. So if it's disability, there's a group that is focused on really focusing on disabilities and education awareness, and actually people telling their own stories. So I worked with this one organization where I did some education sessions on invisible disabilities for them, because they basically wanted to create events and bring in people all from all over the world, because their organization was global, and some of the employees telling their own stories, whether it's they themselves having disabilities, or their kids or people in their family. So really experiencing that, and a lot of organizations that are partnering with different nonprofits or charities who actually put some resources towards disabilities, or whether it's BIPOC, or depending on what their focus is. And so that's really one thing that I've seen a lot of. Also, if you think about from an HR perspective, just because I've been in the benefits world for a while, I think it's becoming more apparent even in the benefits world around, so a benefit plan, for example, a group benefit plan for an employee base or an organization, probably putting in more aspects of resources in there as part of the benefit plan to support people who, whether they have disabilities or any other invisible disabilities in that case, or mental illness or whatever have you. So have more resources in there so that they can actually access these without too much trouble. So the benefit plan itself, not so much focused just on physical well-being, but also mental well-being. Mm-hmm. So that's one that I've been seeing. Employee assistance plans are a big one as well. So, and that comes as part of, some companies call them wellness plans, and that's overall wellness again. So whether it's, having lunch and learns, bring in more experts to talk about different topics. So just awareness. From an awareness perspective, there's things that have been going on, but I think there's been more in the last year and a half, probably. And out of COVID, I mean, there's been a lot of programs, like HR is working hard through COVID. So whether it's through, just getting employees and making sure they're well to actually work, because they're juggling so much. Mm-hmm. So I think COVID has really opened people's eyes to possibly remote work that we didn't have before. In some cases, part-time work. That is very hard to find depending on what environment you work in, what type of industry or organization. So I think, and flexibility. I think employers have really seen that you just give people a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of flexibility, and they can actually get the job done and just be happier because they can manage their time, their own way. And so I think that has, those have been some of the good things that have come out of, I think,
That's
really
great.
COVID,
Yeah.
that have affected the workplaces in terms of, like, people have realized, I think organizations have realized that talent is, they were missing an entire talent pool of people that were sitting here happily, willing to work remote, but because they're not able to get into the environment physically, perhaps in some cases for us, for me, I can speak for myself with having epilepsy, I'm not allowed to drive. So for me, like, I was working at a job where I was commuting 3 hours every day. And that just got into, that affected me really negatively in terms of my health,
Yeah.
which is why I had to, make a choice and leave and start my own practice as well. So entrepreneurship is a lot that what comes out of it. So because our workplaces are not yet in a place and well designed to actually inclusively incorporate everybody.
Mhm. That sounds amazing. I've heard so many amazing things, like the focus on personal stories of those living with disabilities. There's nothing more powerful than hearing someone's personal story. And that focus on mental health. And I know that COVID was a really hard time for a lot of people, but this is one of the positive things that came out of it, the understanding that, our mental health is really just as important as our physical health. And especially as people from the BIPOC community living with disabilities, maybe we could talk a little bit more about the mental health strain that living with those disabilities and being an employee have on us. I don't know, Cheryl, if you want to share some of that from your experiences, and then anyone can jump in.
Sorry, you want me to discuss, say that again?
The strain, the mental health strain, that being a person who faces these systematic biases as a person from the BIPOC community and someone living with a disability in the workplace.
Well, first, I'll go first with someone living with a disability in a workplace. I know that can be very straining on somebody. For myself, for example, I had lost my last job when my company had found out I did have epilepsy. So that wasn't a really good thing. And I had taken that stress with me, when I was trying to find my next position, my next career move. And it wasn't a great thing because I kept, self second guessing myself, thinking like, what if they find out if I have epilepsy? Are they going to hire me? Can they even, do this to me? I mean, I obviously, when they let me go from my last position, I didn't take it to court or anything. That's not me. But I did keep it a secret for a very long time, even to this company. And this current company has been a very great place for me to be at, because I actually kept it a secret here as well. The only reason they found out was because I actually had a seizure at my office during a company event where clients were there, and I was picked up off the floor and I woke up to paramedics in my face. And the first thing I said to myself was, did anyone see that? Like, hopefully no one caught that, but people did. And I actually came to work the following day thinking, do I still have a job? Did anyone see me? Am I, is anyone thinking differently of me? But no, I got, you know what? You still have your job. You could still do your job. No one's thinking any different from you. So I got a really positive feedback with this company, and I was actually very happy about that, because I got a lot of love and support from everybody, and they showed it to me all the time, with purple decorated around my desk or anything like that, putting first aid on everyone's desk on how to handle someone if they had a seizure. My company even brought in Epilepsy Toronto to help educate some of our employees on what to do if someone had a seizure, and what it was about, and any questions that people had regarding the BIPOC community. yeah, and being a person of color, I don't think that's really affected me as much in my working career. But I guess when I was younger, obviously in school, it was a big issue, with all the, words people want to use. I was a young girl from India with an accent, came to Canada. Obviously, you get words thrown at you from every which direction. Um, but you know what? In the end, I realized I'm strong. I can handle anyone's words. They can bring it at me. So
Yes. I'm sorry to hear about your previous experience with your previous employer, but
don't be. People always say that to me, and I tell them, you know what? It's fine because I've gone on to a better company. I've
Mm.
lost my license. I lost my job, all because of epilepsy, but it only brought me on to something better. Something better I thought I could never have, but it gave me that push.
Yeah. And
And
there's
I
that
wasn't,
strength you mentioned
yeah,
earlier.
and I wasn't looking for a legal field. That never crossed my mind. It just happened to be legal out of all companies to find me that wanted me to work for them. So it was all good that came
Glad.
out of it.
Yes, I'm glad. And I can see definitely that strength that you have in you, and I'll remember that experience. If anything, difficult comes along, there will be something better in the future. In terms of mental health and its intersection with BIPOC and disabilities, Shauna and Paul, would you like to add anything to that from your experience?
I'll go first. In terms of what does come to mind in terms of mental health and BIPOC communities, I think it's what I talk about a lot is just acceptance and awareness within the community. There are a lot of communities that don't accept it as openly, the fact that there's a lot of stigma around, even talking about mental health. Certainly in the last couple of years, we've come a long way where, I can see even within people that I know, whether it's within my own family and friends or just people actually discuss it rather than, perhaps before we would hear things like, oh, it doesn't happen, just keep yourself busy and everything will be fine. So now people actually see that it's, mental is just as important as physical health. And it's just overall wellness that is more important. So I think that for me is the stigma and everything associated with that in terms of being a person of color. So you almost have a certain sort of battle within your own community as a person of color having any kind of mental health issues, leave alone a disability. But then you also have to take that with you and go out in the world and then, wear that other hat of now being a person of color with a disability. So there's two layers to it. When you go out too, I mean, you can take two steps forward because there's a lot of companies that will have diversity inclusion policies and walk the talk. And so you can take those two steps forward. But then again, it also has another side to it where now those are like not steps, but mountains that you're going to need to climb to actually have any effect on whether it's your career or just your life as a whole. So you take two steps forward but then take two steps back at every level, if whether it's at home or within the community or within society. So I think all of this that we're doing in terms of awareness and just talking to everybody about it, I think it changes things, whether it's within our own families, communities, or just organizations.
Yeah, for sure. It forces you to navigate the world differently.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Shauna. Paul, I do want to give you the chance to answer, but before that, I just want to remind the Facebook audience that they can leave their comments or questions in the comment section, and we'll be sure to address them a little bit later. So Paul, if you
I,
like.
I think along the lines of Shawnette, I have similar experiences, again, not coming from the epilepsy perspective, but I think even just presentation on paper, I'm just a name, and I guess the name is very Anglo-Saxon. And then when you speak to me on the phone, perhaps I sound very Anglo-Saxon, then all of a sudden shock, surprise when you see me physically. And I have had that happen in various communities and walks of life, whether it's professional or social or otherwise. You know, I've been in the Black community where people say, well, I don't see disability. I only see you as Black, and vice versa, so on and so forth. I've had in recent years the opportunity to write articles and have discussions, certainly within lawyer communities, and in particular the criminal defense community, and it's sort of trickled over to the prosecution end, where I think those that have known me for a good number of years have come away from some of the articles and said, oh, I never thought about it that way. And, you know, I've really sort of tried to take stock of their behaviors and attitudes towards me. So it's an ongoing process, development of education and awareness. You know, every day is a good day that we're still here. We're not going anywhere. We're standing our ground, and we're always trying to excel at whatever it is we do, however we interact. And you know, we're for all intents and purposes the ambassadors that either get to be front and center or strategically behind the scenes, trying to make the lives and the workplaces and the communities in which we live and intersect, online or in person, better places and inclusive, as opposed to being exclusive.
Yeah.
So that's what I think we're all doing and trying to do, and you know, meeting the challenges as they come, and anticipating some and breaking down barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Shauna mentioned, by excluding all these people, you mentioned that earlier, there's a wealth of talents that we're not accessing.
Yeah.
And so that inclusion is very important, just for our advancement in general. I guess I do want to go back a little bit to Cheryl's story, and talk a little bit about disclosure. I know that you've had some not so great experiences and some wonderful experiences with the companies you've worked at. But for those who might be going through something similar and maybe feeling fear when it comes to their invisible disability and whether it's going to come out or not, what advice would you give them when it comes to disclosing?
Right now, I actually try to tell people, you know what, if they're comfortable, disclose. Because in my instance, when my seizures got worse and where I was actually falling to the ground and shaking, if no one knows how to handle that, how is someone going to help you? If no one knows what epilepsy is, how do they know, you know, what they need to do specifically? Do they need to call 911? With me, I've actually decided, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to disclose, and whether they like it or not, they can either take me on because I'm a really great candidate for their firm, or they can just let me go and go on to the next person. That is fine. I will find something better. But I usually tell people, do what makes them feel more comfortable, because I know a lot of people still today, and I do talk to a lot of people with epilepsy that are looking for work. They don't feel comfortable, and I want them to, but it's just not that easy to feel comfortable to disclose, because you feel judged right away. You don't know what the other person's thinking, right? So I would say disclose if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas me, I've come to terms with it, and I do disclose at this point.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I know that it's not the easiest decision to come to for a lot of people.
No.
And I know, Paul, disclosure is not never really an option for you as someone with a more visible disability. So if you were to look at it, what differences do you see between other differences, I guess, between someone who's living with an invisible disability versus someone who's living with a visible disability in the workplace?
Well, I guess for myself, I often wonder, even in the job seeking process, if in fact I'm applying for a job or applying to get on a board or something like that, it may or may not be relevant to disclose. So it's always the, what's the expression going to be when you're in the waiting room waiting to meet whoever it is. You know, you haven't identified as being racialized, you haven't identified as being a person with a very clear physical disability that you can't hide, you can't pretend. I will never walk straight, you know, and I'll never be anything other than a black man. It's just not going to happen. I think, you know, to the extent that you know, you have to market yourself or, you know, try to build yourself up as best you can to say it's an asset. This is value added that I'm bringing to the table. This is value added that I'm bringing to this company, your organization, the community at large. These are the talents. I mean, people with disabilities, visible or invisible. I think we've got collectively some of the highest levels of education, and we need to claim our space in terms of the marketplace, whether it's as entrepreneurs or as pivotal pieces within businesses. You know, whether you start at an entry level and you work your way up, you have to go for it, and you will always have to work hard or harder, but you know, you've got to seek the support, whether it's inside the organization or company, and go for it. If you want it, go get it. Expect there'll be resistance, but you got to go and get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And as we wait for our live Facebook audience to send in their questions, I do want to talk a little bit more about, so with COVID and it forcing us to look at employees differently and look at how we work differently. And I guess it's also forced us to value the individual in their work. How do you see that affecting or changing how people with disabilities contribute in the workplace in the future? And that's to anyone, sorry, did not specify.
Well, like I said before, I think in terms of COVID, and it's really brought to light the fact that remote work is an option for many people, which very traditionalist organizations had trouble seeing. You know, whether that's through, you know, previous mindsets or how work was done. And also I think it's the industry. I mean, certainly all jobs cannot be done from home, but a lot of jobs are able to be done from home, and we've seen that through COVID very ably. I mean, not everyone likes to work remote, and that's where, you know, people given the option of whether it's a hybrid workspace or, you know, whether it's certain jobs being remote, and if people are happy with that, that's great. But there's certainly, because that could also lead to isolation, depending on, you know, the kind of person and if they prefer having that social activity or not. So I think that's the biggest part, and giving people flexibility, I think has been the biggest one that has come out of COVID, and in terms of employees and in the workplace. And I think entrepreneurship has come a long way too, in terms of I myself, I can speak from my own experience of I worked at, you know, many big corporations before, but I'm currently working with a consulting agency who was started by an entrepreneur, and it's remote, and I love it because I can work from anywhere, you know, as long as I get what I need to get done on my own time at any flexible time. It works for us in terms of if we deliver that to the client. So I think that is also something a lot of entrepreneurs have been able to offer that to people, perhaps that maybe large corporations can't or couldn't.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Shauna. And Paul, I saw you nodding there at the beginning about working from home in those comments. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, COVID, the pandemic, made most of us as courthouse litigators work from home. So it's an adjustment that, for all intents and purposes, was forced upon us. But I think, quite frankly, one of the interesting things that I think I have seen, and I'm sure it's very clear for a lot of lawyers, is I think we've been able to do cases in jurisdictions that we would not normally take cases, because a lot of it can be done on Zoom or Google Meets or whatever it is. So we're doing a lot of virtual trials, and of course, being sensitive to people's acuities to the pandemic. You're able to either have a lot more telephone as well as Zoom conversations and meetings with clients, other lawyers, judges, and judicial officers in order to arrange cases. So in that sense, it has had some benefits, although the original effect was to postpone a lot of things, but it has helped in a lot of ways. So it's interesting to see how technology is helping to bring us closer to a level playing field, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And it's promising to see our ability to change so quickly too. And to
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. And I do have a question from our live audience. So we have a question from Michael on Facebook. And he said, I supported a man who worked at a grocery store for more than 20 years. That length of time ago, it was virtually unheard of for an employer to go to the extent they did to support him. How open have you seen employers being in the past 5 years in terms of supporting their employees when it comes to their disabilities? Oh, Cheryl. We can hear you now.
Well, with my company, currently, I see a doctor twice a year, my neurologist twice a year. So my company has given me the option to go to all my doctor's appointments without having to make up time, and I still get paid for it. If I have a seizure, they actually give me a taxi chit and, either send me home to rest for the rest of the day, or, I'm gone in an ambulance and I'm still getting paid for it. So I find that a lot of, companies do try their best to help.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how all companies are. I mean, I wouldn't know my last one because I was let go, but this one has really gone out of their way for me. If I needed time to rest because I had a seizure at home one night and I told them the following day, I really still don't feel well, I would be at home resting, and they would be like, stay off work, don't log on. So I do get that support. I find at this place that they do help when they can.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sure that even your quality of work, knowing that you're getting that support, is better than ever as well, knowing that your company is standing by you and giving you the time you need.
Of course.
We got a follow-up from Michael. It's just a comment saying every company should support employees who have epilepsy or any other hidden disability. I'm so surprised that any company would let you go if you have epilepsy. I'm shocked. So it's good to know that, that does exist out there.
It does.
Yeah.
And they sometimes don't even tell you it's because of your epilepsy. They'll make up some, I hate to say it, bullshit, reason as to why, you're being let go, downsizing. Not really, because they're rehiring right after you're gone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Shauna or Paul, would you like to comment at all? If not, I can move on to the next comment.
I think I've been in work situations pro and con. I remember while as an undergrad student, I got a job working for a clothing store, and it was facilitated through a disability employment initiative. And initially the store manager was sort of apprehensive and said, "Okay, come in, show me what you can do." And about halfway through, he was required to meet with the program coordinator. And he did everything possible to avoid having the meeting because, as far as he was concerned, I was no different than any other person on the floor. Not going to treat him special. He hits his targets and so on and so forth. I know moving to a more, sedentary employment situation, I had been working for an agency, and it was a progressive agency. And it was always interesting that when my contract was up, I said, here you are, a progressive agency that prides itself in advocating on behalf of people. And I said, I'm president of the United Federation of Small Bladder People. And here you are, you have situated me in a workstation that is the furthest place from the men's washroom. How do we get that? No ifs, ands, or buts. And it's so funny because it was really easier for me to walk downstairs to go to the men's washroom than to walk around to the other side of the floor plan to get to the men's washroom. But I did that. But I always thought that was funny.
Yeah.
No inquiry as to whether it was okay. I mean, clearly, again, I couldn't hide the way I walked, but there was no consideration as to whether I should have been situated somewhere else. I mean, again, put the onus on me to ask. But again, you're so lucky to get the job that you don't want to turn things upside down. And I guess I was shy.
Yeah. No, you said something that's very important. There's that feeling of gratefulness that we got the job in the first place, that it's so hard to ask for anything else that we might need. And that's another difficult thing to get past. So thank you for sharing that experience. I do have a comment from someone on Facebook. Gloria said, I struggled to get my workplace to understand. My menstrual cycle is one of my triggers. One day I was feeling unwell. My supervisor sent me an email sent an email out to all management asking if my menstrual cycle really does make me weak. But that is a question she could have asked me. So yeah, there's not a lot of understanding, I guess, to employers. Yeah. Gloria also wanted Cheryl to know that she could really relate to your story with your workplace. And also all of thank you so much for sharing your stories, that they're great, and she can relate to all of them. So thank you. We are kind of closing in on our time, but I did want to ask a general question, and we've kind of touched on it already a few times, but what do you perceive are the biggest barriers that we have yet to overcome to ensure, an inclusive work environment, an understanding work environment, a work environment with equal opportunity for those from the BIPOC community living with whether it's visible or invisible disabilities? So about some of those barriers or hurdles that we have yet to overcome.
If I can go first,
Sure.
I think the biggest hurdle is attitude and behaviors, because if you have preconceived notions or you just cross your arms and say you're not doing it, this is the way we've always done, the reception will always be poor. The willingness and the ability to do anything that might facilitate the inclusion and integration with BIPOC or people with disabilities will always be a high mountain to traverse. And again, we were seeking inclusion and entrance through the front door, not the back door, not having to scaled a ladder to get upstairs, but we need help, and attitudes and behaviors are a great barrier to making inroads.
Yeah, absolutely. Shawnette, did you want to go?
Sure. And that to take from what Paul said in terms of, attitudes, and I think a lot of that will come from, I mean, people certainly, taking it upon themselves to break their own, whether it's stereotypes or attitudes or biases within themselves, but also awareness. I think, I mean, it's great that all of us are doing this work to keep pushing through and making people aware, but as well, speaking from my own experience of just living with an invisible disability at my previous employer, when, I did talk about very openly from the time, because when I was at that employer, I started having my seizures. So it kind of happened during that time. And I was very open in talking about, the fact that, I was having seizures. I don't know where this came from. And it was all very new to me as well. So I was learning at the same time. And I had good leaders that supported me at the time when I was there as well. Like Cheryl talked about, we had, I educated a lot of people, talked to them about it, just made sure everyone sort of around me understood what needed to be done if I did have a seizure when they were around me. First aid. Um, I sort of put up these first aid posters around me in terms of what next steps should be. So some of that, unfortunately, I guess it does unfortunately, and that's why I'm saying unfortunately, because it does come as like on us as well a little to educate, because when I do educate people, or when I do tell them, they go, oh, okay, I understand more, and then they start asking all kinds of questions to go, okay, to help to understand more, because inclusive is a big word, and I think where we're at now is really whether it's in workplaces or just as a society as a whole, I think it's we're in. So if a company has a diversity and inclusion strategy as a whole, but they're focusing within each one, there's a focus on BIPOC, whether it's women and gender issues, disabilities separately. But I think it's going to be a few years until when now all of these culminate into sort of understanding one person can have a disability and be, a person of color. So how do we sort of check both of those for them and serve them in the best way possible? So I think it's going to be a few years until we see that. But right now, the way I see it from workplaces, I think everyone's just sort of, covering one group at a time.
Okay,
and
absolutely.
That's where I see it.
Yeah. So I think I definitely hear that. Number one, it's very important for the employer to be ready and receptive to hearing all these things. And it is a little difficult when everything is on the person living with a disability to educate. But sadly, that is what it's looking like right now. And maybe in the future, it'll look something a little bit different when employers start looking at it with the intersectionality of all of these barriers or difficulties that the employee faces. Cheryl, I know that you did have something you wanted to say, so I want to give you the floor to share it.
I was just going to say, with me personally, I actually, if I had any issues, like my desk was originally a lot smaller than it was. When I said, my seizures, I usually hurt myself having them falling down. I actually got moved to a desk and in a very open area. That way they were able to move the chair, bring the pillow out of my drawer, put it under my head. So I had the open space, even for paramedics to get to me, bring in the stretcher, take me on it, and go. So my workplace, when I spoke up, was very open to accommodating me. And yes, I've always felt like I owe them a lot more than any an other person there. But at the same time, like Shauna and Paul was saying, you have to speak up sometimes, and not every company is going to be the same and be very, it's a very inclusive, it's a big word they have to start small. And unless you speak up, they need to know where to start from. I guess you can give them that push by speaking up. You know, they can start in that one area and then move their way around to everything else. Like there's, you know, BIPOC, then there's epilepsy, invisible disabilities. There's, you name it. There's tons of different things that people need to work on within the work environment. And it starts with one person, and it could start with you if, you know, you want to be that voice to speak up for everyone else.
Sorry, my mute was not turning off. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned a really good point that yes, it is on the person living with that disability to get that conversation started and get the education going, but then you will benefit every single other employee living with a disability now and to come, because they're learning from you how to accommodate to those people. So Cheryl, what I need to know is, what is this company you work at, and can we all work there?
I work at a law firm downtown.
They sound amazing.
No, it's okay. I think it's in my bio. I work at Blake Castles in Graydon, down on King and Bay, in
They
the big
sound amazing.
CIBC building.
Do you know Link Rogers?
Yes, I do.
Tell him I
doing
said hello. We were in law
Oh.
school together.
We're doing a big event with him right now.
Okay.
Black at Blake's, to be specific.
Right. Yeah.
So as you can see, my company does do a lot of we have a large diversity team to do a lot of, you know, diverse events like this. Like I was telling Paul, Black at Blake's is a big one we have.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you've had such a positive experience with them. We are a little past our time. We did start a little bit late, so there's no rush, but I wanted to give you the chance to share any final thoughts you might have with the audience, anything at all, and any of you can go first.
I don't know what to say more than what we talked about. I think we've covered a lot of topics. I think in terms of, I think a lot of people do talk about disclosure, and we did have, you know, a great panel discussion last year on disclosure. So if anyone wants to look that up on the Epilepsy Toronto Facebook page, you can do that. But I think in terms of, we get a lot of questions, and I get a lot of questions particularly about that. So if we disclose, how do we disclose? What's the right time? When? And like Cheryl said, I think it's around, you know, the environment you work in. You can sense the culture, you can sense the leadership, and you can sense what their ability to receive that will be. When you work with somebody, whether it's a group or just the organization culture as a whole. So, and then if you do feel comfortable in that environment, then you can certainly start to speak up for yourself and, you know, educate, make people aware, whatever that looks like. But I think, because everyone does have that question about, there's a lot of stigma with talking about, will I get the job, like, you know, Cheryl was saying, or will they not have me here anymore? When I got my current job with my employer, who's awesome, like Cheryl's, but we're not hiring. She was great. Like, I mean, until I even went to the meeting with her, I didn't even know, with the owner, I didn't know if I would talk about it. I mean, my story was very public, and it's all over online. So it wasn't any secret at the time. So, you know, if she did talk to me about it, I was welcome to chat about it, but it wasn't front and center of my discussion. I think I brought enough quality in terms of professional experience to the role. And I didn't feel the need to, you know, perhaps bring that up unless I was asked about it. And so I just really sensed what the meeting was like, and sort of went for it, you know, and just in general, it was a very casual meeting, and the conversation, you know, came up about just different people's lives and lifestyle and work-life balance and whatnot, and we just came upon the conversation. I felt comfortable enough to talk about it, And, you know, I was still hired at the end of it. So I think you really need to sense where you're at in terms of your own personal journey, because once you do it, then there's no turning back. Because once you come and talk about it, then, you know, then you need to almost own that story and you know what you're talking about, educate people. And, you know, like Paul, I think, said previously, you kind of, you know, you become sort of the driver in your own life and go, okay, I have it now, you know, you can take it or leave it.
Oh, I love that line. I used it in one of my speeches before.
Take it or leave.
It's
a good one.
I think we're hosted by Epilepsy Toronto. It's clearly a fantastic organization that provides a lot of service and a lot of support. I think it's incumbent upon job seekers or even those that are just curious on different things to you know, make the call, email, or whatever the case may be, and build allies so that whatever the mystery is or the obstacles are of getting into the workplace or a particular chosen area or something of curiosity, start doing the network, start asking the questions so that it can be demystified. I mean, quite frankly, I was born into a family where a number of people in my family were trained academically as lawyers. If I didn't have that as a foundation, I wouldn't know what law is. Now, that being said, I mean, I've chosen or fallen into a completely different path that nobody knows what I'm talking about, but still, you know, to have had that opportunity to have all those talking heads around me from time to time as a little kid, at least I had that. You know, we're 2021, technology is available, but certainly whatever you find online may not be as good or may not be put out in a format or a way that answers all your questions. Contact Epilepsy Toronto to see if either they themselves, somebody there can help you, or maybe they can put you on to somebody so that you can get the one-to-one, because not one size fits all. You have to customize it. It's got to be made to measure. Find your place, claim your place.
True.
Good lines today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, seek that knowledge from the right places. And Epilepsy Toronto, this is what they do. I'm glad they went to Cheryl's place, I know, to share some of that Epilepsy 101.
Two times.
Twice. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that also, Paul. Cheryl, did you have any last words?
I was going to say, you know what, just like Paul and Shaunette said, if you're going to speak up, because when I started speaking up about my health, not only was it posted all over my Facebook, all on LinkedIn, you can see that I've volunteered with Epilepsy Toronto. I've done some, you know, work with them. I've helped with a book, but I've had a few speeches where I did for Epilepsy Toronto that were recorded and actually posted on YouTube online. So I know that if you Google my name, just my first and last name, you'll see tons of things popping up online, and it's all epilepsy related in some way. So I know that if you're gonna come out with a bang, because your name is going to be plastered everywhere online. And I don't want people to, you know, be ashamed of coming out. If you're going to come out, know that there will be, I won't say consequences, but you can, if someone wants to look you up, they will find something. I mean, my last speech I did that was recorded, I was talking about suicide, and my HR found it, you know, epilepsy and suicide. And imagine your own HR finding out, and it was at this place of work, but they were fine.
Yeah.
You know? So that's all I wanted to say. It will be out there online because you can access anything out there.
These final thoughts are amazing. So thank you all for sharing them. I did want to say, I know Shaunette mentioned the disclosure workshop. There's a link to that in the comments now on Facebook Live if anyone's interested. There's also a link to our YouTube where I believe Cheryl's story is as well, if anyone's interested in checking that out. So I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. Cheryl, Shauna, Paul, your stories are powerful, and I know that everyone listening and watching and tuning in with us today, connected to them at some level and learned a lot. And I know there were some commentators that were a little bit shocked by your experiences, but it's really important for those experiences to be shared and talked about. So thank you for educating us and sharing those experiences with us. And thank you to everyone who tuned in on Facebook Live and for sending in your comments and your questions. I hope it was as educational for you as it was for me. So thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.